right, welcome. I think we're going to try something new today. I'm going to do a little tier list of the 2015 first round, kind of seeing how these players have progressed. A lot of these players are still young, 24, 25-ish. A lot of them will continue to progress and have better careers than we've seen so far, and some of them may already be past their peak. But let's dive into it. Starting off with Zach Senyshyn, originally drafted by the Boston Bruins. That's easily the bust category. He hasn't played much time in the NHL, and when he hasn't been effective at all. Next up, Kyle Connor. He had a career year last year. He was incredible last year. If he can repeat that, at least this upcoming season and maybe future seasons, you can definitely consider him for the franchise tier. But at this point, he's had one fantastic season and some very, very good seasons as well. I think he needs to replicate that success from last year. Next up, Ilya Samsonov. I'm going to put him in half decent. He's shown flashes that he can be an excellent starting goaltender in the NHL. Obviously, the last two seasons were, definitely questionable. His first real season in the NHL was great. I think there's a potential there. Maybe a new start in Toronto will help him achieve that level of success and expectation everyone was anticipating. Until then, I have him at half decent. He may move up, he may move down in future years. He's kind of one of those flux players. Next up, we have Mitch Marner. I'm putting him as elite. Purely elite instead of franchise. He has franchise numbers, but he also plays with Austin Matthews, one of the most lethal goal scorers in the entire NHL. And I think part of Matthews' success is having Marner on that wing. Marner is an incredible passer. He plays defense. I'd be curious to see what Marner would look like with, another, first line center or wing. Kind of see what that success looks like from there. I have doubts about him being franchise at this moment, but he's definitely an elite player, and there's no question about that at this point. Next up, I have Brock Besser. I'm going to put him in the very good. He plays good defense. He doesn't always show up on the points board. He's not, he does. He's usually around like 40 to 50 points throughout an 82-game season. But he's pretty good defensively, kind of underrated in my opinion. Doesn't throw the body around a whole lot. I think very good is where I'm going to put him at this moment. I kind of had him between okay and very good. But keep in mind, these tiers are just for the first round, not in comparison to the entire NHL. So there's also that. But I'm gonna put him in very good for now. Could probably put him in between. Next up, Noah Juulsen, the Montreal Canadiens. I'm gonna put him in the bad. I actually didn't want to do the whole terrible side. I think that's terrible and bust are pretty much the same thing. Juulsen had a decent last year. He wasn't awful. He needs to continue that progression because the years prior he looked like an AHL player playing in the NHL. It's that simple. This last year wasn't awful. Hopefully he can build off that and become a top 4 defenseman. I don't know if he'll ever reach that potential. He might just stay a top 6, but nonetheless, he's progressing in the right way. Last year I would have just had him as a bust. This year, not so much. Next up, this might be a little controversial. Joel Eriksson Ek. Where am I going to place him? Elite. Dude plays with, second to third line minutes. Puts up 50, I think he put up 46 points last season in an 82-game span. 26 goals. He's a Selke candidate every year. He's incredible defensively. He's part of one of the best defensive lines in all of hockey. I think he has reached elite level, even though he may not get the recognition. If you watch him night in and night out, what he brings to a game it's incredible, and not many players are able to bring that. Eriksson Ek, you can make the case for him being very good. I have him in the elite status. I think it was a very underrated pick by the Wild, and it's panned out very well for that team. Next up, Gabriel Carlsson. Yeah, just bad. I'm not going to expand too much on that. He's just not that great. Same with his next one, Connor McDavid, obviously franchise. Also, a point of note, franchise players are like potential Hall of Famers in this tier ranking. A lot of these guys are still very young and still have a lot of potential to get into the franchise mode. I think Marner has potential. Kyle Connor has potential of those we've reviewed so far. There's a few others that will have potential to be franchise players, but it's because all these players are young. I still think there's still a little more to prove in terms of consistency with these players. Well, next up, we have Mikko Rantanen, definitely elite. Again, how much of his success is attributed to the likes of Nathan MacKinnon and Landeskog. Landeskog tends to be the first one back on that line, which allows Rantanen and MacKinnon to drive the net more and get more points. Honestly, Rantanen is excellent defensively as well. Maybe in like a year or two, depending on how he progresses, I could see him becoming a franchise type player. But I think on a line, I don't even think he's the best player on his line. I give that to MacKinnon. Next up is Travis Konechny. He's very good. He's pretty consistent. You just hope he stays healthy and can play 82 games. But when he's on the ice, he's very good. He could be a 20-goal scorer easy. Next up, Jack Eichel. The last couple of years have been kind of brutal, but before that, all the seasons with Buffalo, he was a point-per-game player. He was a game-changing player, definitely an elite status. It's going to be make it or break it for Eichel this season and next season, depending on how he plays this year. If he doesn't achieve that point-per-game status, he could be going back down to very good. If he's already reached his peak for his career, he might finish his career in the okay category. He needs to maintain that success he had in Buffalo. He's more than capable of it. Question is, will his ego kind of get in the way of that? We'll find out, but for now, I'm having him an elite. Jacob Larson, okay. I think he's trending in the right direction. He had a really good, I don't want to say a really good season, but he had a pretty good season last year in Anaheim. The years before, he wasn't all that good. Had a breakthrough season last year. I think he's trending in the right direction. Again, he really wasn't bad at all last year. He was a very consistent defensive defenseman last year. So, I have him in the okay category, trending upwards. I think throughout his career, he's a defenseman. If he keeps progressing the way he has, he'll probably finish his career in the very good section. I don't think he'll ever be a top pairing defenseman, but definitely a top 4 in his near future. Next up is Pavel Zacha. I have him as half decent, and I guess here's why. 14 goals, 17 goals in 2 of the past 3 seasons, but he's been playing with top 6 minutes, and he still hasn't been producing. Some of the lines he's been on have been fantastic lines. He's been the only non-producer of some of those lines. I have my doubts. I think he's still progressing. He's still growing, still learning his role. It might be good to have a change in an organization. Going to Boston might help him. It might not. We'll see. That'll be a big change. This is a big year for Pavel Zacha. I have him in the half decent. He's not bad, but I wouldn't say he's mid-tier by any means. Next up, Zaboral of the Boston Bruins. Now, I also have him in the half-decent category. He's taken a long time to develop, but he's finally getting there. Last season when he played, he looked really, really good. He looked like he could be a consistent top 4 defenseman in his future. Obviously, he got hurt. Can he get back to that level of play? This season, we know he'll be starting on that third pairing, probably with Mike Riley to start the season. How does he progress from there? Does he keep developing, or is this kind of at the point with Zaboral? It's what you see, it's what you get. I'm putting half decent because he's trending in the right direction, kind of like Larson. He just needs to continue that improvement and consistency. Next up, Matt Barzal. Now, dude's an elite puck handler. He's an elite playmaker. Hasn't had a career year like he has in his rookie season. Nonetheless, puts up points. I think he's kind of gotten lost in a very defensive first-minded system. He's expected to play a lot more defense, where he's more of an offensively driven player. Not so much a two-way forward. He can play defense. He's played pretty decent defense the past few years. I wouldn't say he's a Selke nominee by any means, but nonetheless, I think if this team gets back to attempting to score goals, he'll easily be an elite goal scorer in the league, as he was just a few years ago. Next up, we have again Evgeny Svechnikov. Whew. Yeah, bad. He hasn't quite progressed the way you want him to. He hasn't been totally awful, but definitely a fourth liner at this point in Detroit. Maybe third liner. Kind of see what his development brings. Next up, we got Timo Meier. Very good. He's had a couple 30-goal seasons, but that's kind of where it stops with Timo Meier. Defense is kind of there. Passing, he's usually gets about as many assists as he does goals throughout a season, so about a 50-50 player right there. Again, with him, you just want to see that consistency in being able to put the puck in the net from season to season. I think if he follows it up with another 30-goal season this year, you can have that conversation about putting him in the elite tier. But for now, I still got him in the very good. Guryanov, I have is half decent. I had a lot of hope for Guryanov in Dallas when he got drafted. I thought it was one of the steals of the draft, and I was just incorrect. He never really developed into the player he was envisioned to be. He never really panned out, but he hasn't had a bad career. Definitely, a third line player at this point. Can produce decently on a third line, but when he's given top 6 minutes, he doesn't tend to produce a whole lot more. So third line seems to be a decent fit. Jack Roslovic, I guess I'll go with okay. Again, more of a third liner. Hasn't had this fantastic career, but also hasn't been all that bad. He provides like a different element to games. I don't know what it is about him. It might just be like it's one play usually. It's like one hit he'll have, or I don't know. There's something about him that kind of changes the ebb and flow of a game, and can turn the tides of a game. So I don't know. Just for watching him, I have him in the okay status. His stats would indicate maybe half decent. But, overall, I like Jack Roslovic. I think he gets better every single year he plays. So, again, I'm going to do the same tier list or tier ranking next year. I think a lot of these guys have make it or break it years this year. So, there's also that to keep in mind. Next up is Thomas Chabot. Chabot, I'm going to have in the elite tier for now. Dude eats up well over 26 minutes a game, at least for the past couple seasons. He's a top pairing defenseman. I think a couple more years, if Ottawa is good this year and Chabot can get his plus minus out of the negatives, I think that would be a long way, or a huge improvement in his stats. Additionally, I think a few more years of just maintaining what Thomas Chabot is doing, definitely a franchise type defenseman. I don't think there'll be any question about that. I still want to make sure he's still being a consistent player. Until then, I'm going to have him in the elite category. But nonetheless, big fan of Chabot. I think he's an excellent defenseman. I wish he was on any of the teams I cheered for. Next up, we have Mr. Jake DeBrusk. I'm going to put him in very good. Let me tell you why. He's had 2 seasons where he scored 25 or more goals. I think it was 25 and 27 goals. He's been a part of a system where, under Bruce Cassidy, there's been a lot of sandpaper. He's been a healthy scratch from a number of games. He's been a fourth line player. And it's not from the lack of motivation or drive or want to do well. I think it's just a lot of sandpaper with the coach. Bruce Cassidy expects his young players to be, come in and be elite right away. And sometimes it doesn't matter who you're paired with. In the eyes of Bruce Cassidy, you should still produce. That's not the case, especially with DeBrusk. He's kind of a unique player. When he's put in the right position, he flourishes, he thrives, he plays hard, he goes hard into the corners, he flies, he plays defense. This guy, with the right circumstances, can be a consistent 30-goal scorer. I think he has all the skills and all the talent to be able to do that. We'll see what a new coach brings in Boston. I think he'll start the season on that first line with Marchand DeBrusk. Well, I mean, Marchand will be out until December, but last year when he was on that line, he was scoring at a 40-goal pace, and it just looked natural. It didn't look like he was going on this crazy streak or whatever. It just looked like natural Jake DeBrusk. So for that, I have him in very good. You can definitely make the case for him being okay, but definitely very good. Who we have next? We have Nick Merkley. Yeah, definitely a bust. He only played 9 games for San Jose last year. I think he had an injury too, but when he played in the NHL level, he hasn't looked all that great. A couple seasons ago, what do you have? 10 points in 24 games, 2 goals, 8 assists, which is a decent point production, but kind of just looks lost on the ice sometimes. Hasn't really produced at the AHL level either. Definitely a bust at this point, kind of with Zach Senyshyn. Next up, we have Anthony Beauvillier. I'm going to go with okay. His stats, would suggest he's, can be a 20-goal scorer, but he's not quite a 20-goal scorer in the league. Again, this is a defensive-minded system he's playing in. Goals aren't really, don't seem to be a priority for this team and organization. The new coach may change that, and we may see a change between him and Barzal in terms of goals scored this year. We'll see what happens, but for now, I'm putting him in the okay category. Next up, Lawson Krause, kind of the same thing. Had a good year last year. Has potential, playing in a rough organization. Maybe just like all the factors around him aren't playing to his favor. A pretty good defensive forward. Nonetheless, he's a very good defensive player. But again, you want to see that point production. It really hasn't been there for him. It hasn't been terrible, but it hasn't been great. It's more of like what you'd expect out of a third liner in terms of point production. So for that, I'm going to have him in the okay. I think his defense is very good. I think his offense is half decent. So split the difference, put him in okay. Next up, we have Dylan Strome. I'm going to put him in very good. Multiple 20-goal seasons, solidly a second-line center in the league. I like Dylan Strome's game a lot. I think he brings a lot to the table. I have him very good. Definitely not an elite player, but I think he's definitely above the okay tier. I'd take Dylan Strome over any of these guys in the okay tier any day. Next up is Colin White. Colin White had a decent rookie year, and that's kind of where it stopped for him. He finished 11th in Calder voting his rookie year. DeBrusk finished 12th for perspective. And that's really been it. Colin White hasn't produced a whole lot since then. Hopefully, it's just a matter of getting him with the right line mates, and that hasn't been figured out. But until that gets figured out, he's not really producing at a rate you want to see even a third liner produce at the NHL level. So for that reason, just bad. Next up is Noah Hanifin. Now, Noah Hanifin started his career in Carolina, went to Calgary. I think he's been there 4 years now, and he's really turned into an elite defenseman. Logs upwards over 21 minutes a game consistently. If you just watch the guy play, he's a shutdown defenseman in his own zone, and he puts up points. It's surprising how many points he puts up, but he's excellent in his own zone. He's excellent at keeping forwards to the outer edges and to the corners. He's good at keeping the crease clear for the most part. I think he's turned into an elite defenseman. I don't really have any questions about that. Next up is Ivan Provorov. Provorov, if he can stay healthy, he's definitely an elite level player again. Kind of for the same reasons with Hanifin, except Provorov has stayed with the same team. Provorov is a top 2 D pairing in the league at worst. He's just an excellent player. He can provide a little bit of offense, but man, is he excellent in his own zone. Zach Werenski, I'm also going to put him in the elite category. I actually had him on the offensive very good. His stats have been kind of questionable. About a 500 team, you'd expect a top pairing defenseman not to be in the negative for plus minus. He is a little more offensive minded, which gets him a few more points than, he probably should, but it also kind of leaves the Blue Jackets exposed in the defensive zone a bit. That's the way the Blue Jackets are currently coached. Defensive players are expected to drive into the offensive zone to provide more goals and scoring assists, but that also leaves you a little more vulnerable on the defensive end. I think Werenski's kind of a product of that. However, the dude eats up minutes. When he's in his own defensive zone, he can be good. There's definitely a lot of room for improvement on his own defensive zone, but I think the way he's trending, the way he grows every year, I'm gonna have him in the elite category. You can definitely make the case for very good. Definitely not a franchise player. So that kind of wraps up my my 2015 draft list. Let me know what you guys think, who you agree with. I realize this can be a little controversial. I think a redraft might just be an easier thing to do in the future. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, and appreciate you guys for watching. All right, take care, guys.